Hello everyone, welcome. This is Middle East Now. First, our headlines. High tension in the Middle East as an Iranian attack on Israel looks imminent. 2 Israelis were killed in a knifing attack on the streets of a major city. And the U.S. is moving more firepower to the Mediterranean. Israel's defense forces are on high alert as an Iranian attack is perceived to be imminent. We'll start with Joe Brown's report.
I emphasize that there is no change in instructions from Home Front Command. We will provide you with all the necessary warnings of all threats. And until we say otherwise, there is no change in the preparations for the home front. We will update you, only when it's necessary. In this regard, we are ready with a strong defense, in air, sea, and land.
The waiting game continues. Israelis are bracing for an imminent attack from Iran. No one knows when it will happen, or what exactly will happen, only that it will happen. But despite lingering fears of what could be heading their way, Israelis have a clear message: life must go on.
Just don't take it like it's black and white. If this rocket's going to go to Tel Aviv and that's it, building is going to fall. I'm pretty sure that everything is going to stay the same.
I just want to tell all the Israelis that we can't live in scared, and we need to continue our lives. And Am Yisrael Chai.
Israel has been on high alert after Iran vowed retaliation against the alleged IDF assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, as well as the confirmed IDF strike in Beirut that killed senior Hezbollah commander Fouad Shukr. And Israel is preparing for any eventuality.
We are prepared very strongly in defense, on land, and in the air. And we are ready to move quickly to attack or to respond. We will exact a price from the enemy, as we have been doing in recent days. If it dares to attack us, it will pay a heavy price.
As the US sends more of its warships and fighter jets to the Middle East, CENTCOM Chief Michael Kurilla has arrived in Israel, where he will meet IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi to discuss the best methods of foiling the impending Iranian attack. This comes a few days after Halevi met his British counterpart Sir Tony Radakin, where they also held a situational assessment on the rising tensions. Both the US and the UK helped Israel shoot down multiple Iranian missiles during the last attack in April. As did Jordan, whose Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi has travelled to Tehran on Sunday to try and cool tensions in the region. Meanwhile, flights to Israel have faced major disruptions, with dozens of international airlines cancelling flights to the region, as well as domestic flights between Tel Aviv and Eilat. But Israel has reiterated that its airspace is open, and its flagship carrier El Al has been adding flights to its schedule to make up for the cancellations. But the question remains, when will Iran strike? Reports suggest that the US is expecting it to be by Monday at the earliest. Northern Israel got a taste of what it could look like early on Sunday morning, with dozens of missiles fired from Lebanon. But this imminent Iranian attack, utilizing all of its proxies throughout the Middle East, will be considerably larger, even larger than April's salvo, and it is up to Israel and its allies to thwart these attacks or, at the very least, minimize the damage.
Here in the studio are I-24 News Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran and international analyst Yaki Dayan. Let's start with you, Ariel. It's a war of statements at this stage. Many statements all over the place.
Many statements, but I do feel like in recent hours they have subdued. There's what's called the quiet before the storm. I think that's kind of what's gathering right now, because if we look at Iran's statements on Friday, it felt like they'd already launched the strike. But it appears what they did launch, instead of rockets, was a substantial psychological warfare operation. That's what did happen. But what we are seeing today, obviously, different Iranian pro-Axis mouthpieces, Al Mayadeen, they're saying Iran's response will cross Israel's red lines. We heard today the Houthis, surprisingly, not referring to the pending strike against Israel, but announcing a resumption of strikes in the Red Sea. But I think the most interesting development in recent hours is a very rare visit by the foreign minister of Jordan to Iran, meeting with acting foreign minister Ali Bareri Kahani. In that meeting, according to a Jordanian diplomatic source cited by pro-Saudi Sharq al-Awsat, the message from Jordan is that they will not allow their airspace to be a arena for external battles. They maintain the neutrality of their airspace. Safadi also said that he didn't come to bring any messages to relay to or from Israel any messages, but the fact that Jordan, a country that in April 13th, in the previous Iranian strike, they actively participated in intercepting multiple Iranian drones and missiles, some falling in the streets of Amman, causing material damage. They are unfortunately dragged into this, or against their will, are dragged into this, and they're trying to make sure that their interests won't be hurt, but also that if they do down any missiles or drones that fly over their airspace, that it will not be considered by Iran as an act of aggression, but rather an act of self-defense or maintaining one's own territorial sovereignty.
Meanwhile, Yaki, inside Israel, a whole country is just waiting to get bombed somehow, and nobody knows where from and when.
So there are multi-fronts, but there are two main fronts, I would say. One is the Iranian front, and the other one is Hezbollah from Lebanon. Now, if we speak about the Iranians, they are 100%, they know that they need to react to what happened, and they rejected all the American requests to contain their response. I mean, they rejected that. All the messengers that came from Oman and Switzerland by the Americans were completely rejected, so we know that Iran is going to respond. But Iran, bear in mind, doesn't want to have a full-scale war because they are very much interested and focused on making major progress in their military nuclear program. And they don't want anything to distract that, and definitely not a full-scale war. So the other question is Hezbollah and what Hezbollah is and how Hezbollah is going to respond. We know that the Americans are completely running the defense structure like before CENTCOM. So this is why I think that Jordan would be part of this defense structure, as was in April 14th. But nevertheless, I think that Hezbollah is still very much an unsolved puzzle because their response is not clear still in Israel.
Right. I'll just emphasize that what you see on the screen is a file footage. It's not happening right now, but it's something that might happen very much in the next hours or days. We are joined now by Sarit Zahavi, a resident of northern Israel, also a former IDF officer. Hello and good evening to you.
Good evening here from the Alma Center in northern Israel.
How do you describe this situation from your standpoint up there in the north?
Look, I think that even though we are saying that Iran is not interested in a full-scale war, it is totally willing to take the risks. And this was proved in the April attack, and this was proved by Hezbollah policy basically since October 8. We are under constant attacks here, more than 2,500 attacks since October 8, missiles and anti-tanks missiles and rockets and drones. This is the reality here every day. And eventually it is clear that Israel will have to do something. If not now, then later, doesn't matter. But Iran and Hezbollah are aware of the unbearable situation they put Israel in. And I think this is something that we should take in consideration when we try to analyze what's the interest of Iran and Hezbollah.
There are many people in Israel that say that Israel lost the initiative, especially in the north, against Hezbollah. Do you share that view?
I don't think it lost. I just think it didn't take the initiative. It's a matter of decision. There was a decision at the beginning of the war that people that are living here completely supported, that to prioritize the South and definitely to prioritize bringing the hostages back home. Of course, now there are more and more questions about where this is going, where this campaign is going, since the IDF said very clearly that the campaign in the South is about to end. But all of that almost became irrelevant once the Iranians and Hezbollah promise revenge in a much wider scale than what we imagine. And now let's see if they will keep their promise or they will find a way to bring us back to the war of attrition as it was just a week ago.
And if they do cross the line, Israel will retaliate in Lebanon, probably. We've seen the pictures from Beirut airport, people leaving Lebanon and so on.
Look, we can't predict what would be the Israeli response. I guess there are also a lot of questions around here. United States elections are also something that we need to take in consideration. As a resident of the North, I basically think that if Israel is capable of solving the problem of the people of the North, this is highly important because we can't continue to send a message to Hezbollah that it's okay that we have kind of a security belt at the Israeli side of the border. This must end. And we don't see us getting any closer to a ceasefire in the south, while Hezbollah promised that as long as there is no ceasefire in the south, there wouldn't be a ceasefire in the north. Unfortunately, Israel was, how should I put it, a little bit more initiative only after 20 children were killed. And I think that the fact that 20 children were killed was not a surprise. This may happen again with the scale of war that we experienced until now, even without a further escalation, because these are rockets that are launched here every day. Every time we travel on the main roads here, we ask ourselves, are we going to go back alive to our homes? And we continue to live here, and we continue the routine, and we continue the regular lives. But definitely, it's not a way to continue for years. This must end, and people must be back to their homes, 60,000 Israelis.
Yeah. 12 kids, you misspoke there just to make
12
it clear.
kids, I'm sorry.
12 kids. Now, some say that that way or another, this thing with Lebanon and Hezbollah will have to come to some sort of an agreement either before a war or after the war. What's your preference?
Of course, we prefer it without a war. That's for sure. I don't think there is any Israeli that wants to see our soldiers again inside Lebanon. The question is what kind of an agreement? And we over here, everybody understands that Resolution 1701 is irrelevant. UNIFIL or the Lebanese army are definitely not willing to clash with Hezbollah. And any arrangement must be based on the willingness of the monitoring force to clash with Hezbollah, since Hezbollah is going to deceive again and to lie again and to commit to that agreement or other, but without really fulfilling it. So it's highly important that any mechanism that Israel will agree upon will be an effective one, will be limited in deadline, and it will be clear that the people that will come back to live next to the border, I personally live 9 kilometers from the border. It is clear that we want to have security. We want to make sure that Hezbollah is not threatening us anymore on the other side of the border.
Right. Sarit Zahavi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Israeli heads of Mossad, Shin Bet, and IDF are all reportedly blaming Prime Minister Netanyahu for blocking a hostage deal. Add to that some words President Biden told Netanyahu in a phone call, which are not ready for prime time, these words. I-24 News' Bianca Zanini reports.
U.S. President Joe Biden is reportedly fed up with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. According to local media, the American president told the Israeli leader to, quote, stop bullshitting him during their phone conversation late last week. Biden has previously hinted that Netanyahu was stalling efforts to reach a ceasefire for hostages deal with Hamas, and he reportedly added that Israel should not take the president for granted.
I'm very concerned about it. I had a very direct meeting with Prime Minister today, and very direct. We have the basis for a ceasefire. He should move on it, and they should move on it now.
The chance for a ceasefire ruined after the assassination of Haniyeh.
It's not helped.
Wednesday's strike on Hamas top political chief Ismail Haniyeh shocked the leaders of Iran and its proxies Hamas and Hezbollah, and has been widely attributed to Israel, which is nearing 10 months of war with Hamas in Gaza. Haniya was one of the key figures in negotiating a ceasefire for hostages deal that would see a halt to the war and the return of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Days before his death, reports claimed the chance for reaching a deal was closer than ever. Now it's unclear what will happen. On the streets of Israel, protesters continued to demonstrate against the government and for a ceasefire and hostage deal sooner rather than later.
What we have been screaming for months is now clear. There is a hostage release deal on the table, and Netanyahu is deliberately conducting a targeted attack against it.
Netanyahu insists he is still working towards a deal, but Hamas says that the organization has frozen the talks until a successor to Ismail Haniyeh is chosen.
I reiterate and tell our enemies, we will respond and we will exact a heavy price for any act of aggression against us, from whatever quarter. At the same time, we are making a supreme effort on a daily basis to return all of our hostages, without exception. We have an ironclad commitment to return all of them, the living and the deceased. I am prepared to go very far to release all of our hostages while maintaining the security of Israel. The simple truth is that, as of now, Hamas has not agreed to the most basic conditions of the outline.
Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas and the Houthis, have vowed retaliation, and Israel is bracing for a response.
So, Yaki Dayan here in the studio. Netanyahu doesn't have the trust of his security chiefs and the President of the United States as well.
Yeah, I would say that this is correct. I mean, the phone conversation between the President and the Prime Minister emphasizes a few things. One is the lack of trust between the two of them. The second one is that for Biden, this is all about the hostage deal. This is his heritage. This is what he wants to leave. And anything that might jeopardize that is really undermining President Biden, and this is what he feels. And the third thing, he was dragged to this whole war thing with Iran, which he doesn't want because he needs the industrial quiet till November 5th to make sure that Kamala Harris wins the election. And this is something that he doesn't want to happen. So, and he doesn't trust, as I said, Netanyahu. But what President Biden said, that if he would feel that Netanyahu is putting any obstacles to the deal, he would go out publicly. And he hasn't done that. So I think that this is...
leaks is first step, isn't it?
Exactly. So I think that this is the next stage. But now, clearly, the interest of the United States is to contain the attack by the Iranians, by the Hezbollah, because they want to make sure that this reaction is not developing into a full-scale war. So this is clearly the top interest of the United States now, is to contain the response by Hezbollah in Iran.
Now, the negotiators tell Netanyahu, don't even send us there because there's no point anymore.
But I would say, Jacob, here that the negotiators, it's about time that the negotiators would come out and say it publicly. If they don't believe and they don't trust Prime Minister Netanyahu, they cannot just brief the journalist behind the scenes.
Yeah, but you can imagine the hell that will break when they do, right?
But this is what they should do. If they do feel that Netanyahu is failing this hostage deal politically, because of political reasons, this is their obligation to go out and do that. And I think that as long as they are not doing that and just briefing journalists behind the scenes, their voice is not being heard as it should. And it would be heard if one of the top negotiators, would go out publicly and say that there is a problem.
Yeah, by the way, the hostage families are now, more and more of them are saying the same thing. Come out and talk to us, talk to the people, and tell the truth. All right, now let's go to the north. I-24 News' Robert Swift is reporting live from northern Israel tonight. Rob, what's the latest?
The border here remains pretty tense. At the minute, there's been limited action on the northern border. Nothing which is outside the usual scale of violence that we see here. Rocket fall earlier in Kiryat Shmona, and there has been Israeli attacks inside southern Lebanon. But for the most part, the tensions here remain being felt by the communities. We've been spending a lot of today moving around some of the evacuated communities, talking to the people who, despite it being evacuated, are still nonetheless here. Now, there was a couple of young guys I spoke to who said that they were serving in reserve units here and that most of the population does remain evacuated. They said the number of people living in towns like Shlomi, it goes up and down depending on the tensions of each given day. So with the tensions as they are right now, they think that the population has gone back down again. But many people have chosen over the last few months to return. They said because they've just been away from home for so long, 9-10 months away from home, and they really couldn't take it anymore. These two guys I was speaking to, in fact, said that you really can only tell how many people are present in the village each day when it comes to Shabbat and prayers at the synagogue, and that when you can get an idea of the headcount of people living here. That is an indication of the tensions that are being felt here, with mayors in northern communities being provided with a document by the IDF earlier this evening, which gave some idea as to the scale of a conflict that could take place here and precautions that mayors and the communities here would need to take if the tensions here do escalate into a larger conflict.
Okay, Robert, thank you very much for this live report from northern Israel. We'll stay in the neighborhood. Where's Syria in this brewing Middle East picture? We have Omar Al-Muqdad with us. Good evening to you, a Syrian-born journalist and filmmaker. Hi, Omar.
Hi, how you doing?
All right. So there's a lot going on inside Syria, as you probably know. What's your assessment as to Assad's point of view regarding Israel and this coming conflict?
Well, it seems that Bashar Assad, Syria is the only side in this chaotic situation which hits the entire region. Is the only side that's trying to avoid confrontation with Israel. The Syrian regime is a long time ago decided that he is not in his interest to go to war with Israel at this point, because all he cares about is his situation in Syria, and his main enemy is actually inside Syria, the Syrian people. So now they even made changes in the structure of the Syrian army to make it more professional and more ally with the Syrian regime, loyal to the Syrian regime. So it won't repeat the same scenario that happened in 2012 and the following years, where thousands of soldiers defected from his army. The Syrian regime is in his lowest level at this point, and he is not going anywhere toward any direct confrontation with Israel or with anybody. So even with we have witnessed that even Bashar Assad is not even commenting on this event. So he's trying to neutralize his regime from all that, and for a very good reason, because he doesn't control at least 20% of the country, then still stuck with northeast, and the Syrian opposition is still calling for the implementation of the Security Council resolution and the change of power in Damascus. And I think at this point, he's not in a place where he can add another conflict to his agenda.
How deep is the Iranian influence in Syria, which is growing?
Well, it's incredibly deep. Actually, the last 2 weeks, Iran shipped suicide drones into Syria. I don't know if I think this comes with the United States trying to reinforce its bases in northeast Syria and North Syria. So I think they know about what the Iranian is doing right now there. So they are increasing their military presence throughout more sophisticated weaponry. And they are also controlling the inner circle of Bashar Assad. We have witnessed in the last month where the Syrian regime security forces tried to neutralize some of the Iran allies like Luna Shibel, the advisor of Bashar Assad. So there are a lot of influence and control, and I think Bashar Assad at the same time is trying to tell the Iranian that he is not interested to go into war with Israel or anybody else. So this is why when Iran retaliates last month, they retaliated from Tehran, not from Syria. So, but as a matter of fact, they are deeply rooted in Syria right now. They trying to rearm the Syrian regime. They're sending more sophisticated weaponry into the country. And doesn't seem that they are going out of Syria anytime soon.
Yeah. Also, Russia and Turkey seem to get more involved there. Is this welcomed by Assad?
Well, in fact, Turkey is trying to change its policy towards Syria to get more relation with Bashar Assad, as their main enemy is the Kurdish forces up north. And they found that it's in their strategic interest to smooth down the relationship with Bashar Assad instead of just keep this matter escalated with Damascus. So for Turkey is a strategic goal. It would serve a strategic goal to regain a relationship with Bashar Assad, to eliminate the Kurdish threat up north. So bringing Damascus, northern Syria, is better than having a Kurdish entity established northeast Syria. For the Russian, of course, the Russian, it seems that they are happy and satisfied about their bases in the Mediterranean, in Tartus and Latakia. That's what they really care about. I don't know what is the point here, but it seems that Damascus and the rest of Syria is in the hand of the Iranian, and the Syrian coast is in the hand of the Russian, where the Russian bases are located, and it seems that the Russians
always have points. We'll leave it at that. Omar Al-Maktoum, thank you very much for that. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, will Erdogan be able to block Instagram in Turkey? In a moment.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to Middle East Now here on I-24 News. In the central Israeli city of Holon today, a terror attack in which 2 Israelis were killed and 2 wounded. I-24 News' Joe Brown reports.
Horror in Holon. An Israeli woman in her late 60s and a man in his 70s were killed in a stabbing spree on Sunday morning in the central Israeli city just south of Tel Aviv.
The police quickly arrived to the scene as the terrorist was attacking the civilians who were here behind me. As you can see, enjoying the morning in the park, the terrorist managed to get to the main road where the police officers engaged him with gunfire, and his death was declared at the scene.
According to Magen David Adom, there were 3 separate attacks around 500 meters apart from each other. An elderly couple was stabbed at the entrance to a park. The husband taken to hospital in serious condition, whilst the wife was pronounced dead at the scene. 1 man was killed at a nearby bus stop, and another person was stabbed at the entrance to a bus terminal. The attacker was a 34-year-old resident of the West Bank who had no prior offences and did not have a permit to enter Israel. It is unclear how he managed to set foot on Israeli soil to carry out the attack. IDF troops visited the West Bank home of the terrorist, measuring it for a potential demolition. Also arriving on the scene, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, praising the police for neutralizing the terrorist and urging civilians to remain vigilant.
Our war is not only against Iran, but here in the streets. This is exactly why we armed the people of Israel. More than 150,000 gun licenses were issued in the last 8 months. I want to say to the citizens, carry weapons. Carry weapons. That's why we armed the civilian rapid response teams. That's why we open more and more civilian rapid response teams. Carry a weapon. It saves lives.
The 2 victims from this attack are the 24th and 25th deaths from Palestinian terror attacks in Israel and the West Bank since October the 7th, creating yet another front for Israel to worry about.
And I-24 News' Nicole Tzedek is in Holon now with the latest from there. Nicole.
Hey, Jacob, good evening. I want to set this scene for you exactly where we are in central Israel right now, because it's been nearly 12 hours since the attack early this morning, but you can see some of this red security tape still remains behind me here in this park. And this is one of the 3 scenes, as our correspondent Joe Brown mentioned in that report. And this is the scene where Rina and Shimon Daniv were stabbed, the elderly couple that were just walking through the park, as their family says they do pretty much every day. It's all part of their routine. And now throughout the day, you can see some more of these remnants right here. I want our cameraman just to see just a latex glove that's still left at the scene. Remnants of all of the medical scenes and personnel that were here earlier in the day treating these 2 victims. As well as throughout the day, we see more and more people coming and lighting candles in memory of the victims as well, as Rina was one of the 2 victims that was killed. Now, as I mentioned, this is just one of 3 scenes that happened in the span of about 500 meters. Now, as this couple was stabbed, we also have a man in his early 20s who was also stabbed while walking his dog here near the park. And then the terrorist went on just past my left over here towards a gas station and bus stop to then go and stab that final man in his 70s who was killed at the scene as well. So a pretty complex operation that the IDF was or not the IDF, but security forces were able to look and see. It wasn't until that final scene by the bus stop, though, that a nearby police officer was able to see the attacker and eliminate him. Now, at this time, Hamas has praised the attack. They have not claimed responsibility, as the attacker was not affiliated with Hamas. But as usually when we see these types of terror attacks, Hamas is quick to praise the attack and use it as another way to try and incite more violence, calling on others in the West Bank and East Jerusalem to come out to different areas and commit other attacks as well. Now, right now, the major question still remains exactly how this attacker was able to come into Israel, because right now it shows that he was able to illegally come into Israel on August 1st. 3 days ago. So the question remains exactly how he was able to come into Israel without a permit, going through one of the border crossings from the West Bank, and then remain here in Israel for the past 3 days before committing this attack. That's something that the IDF and security forces are still investigating at this time, Jacob.
Thank you very much, Nicole Tzedek in Holon, for that report. Back to the studio here, I-24 News, Ariel Saran. Prime Minister Netanyahu trying to push back claims that he's backing off from his hostage deal, and he speaks publicly a couple of minutes ago. What was he saying?
Prime Minister Netanyahu issuing a public statement. First of all, pushing once more his claim that it's only increasing military pressure on Hamas. That's what will bring to the end of the war and the hostages out. Also referring to the prospect of an Iranian response to the Israel's being accused for eliminating Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. But Netanyahu regarding this saying that our red lines are known and we will respond to any attempt to violate them. With any attack that we receive, we will deliver double the blows to the enemies. Now, saying that Iran and its allies are trying to encircle Israel with a ring of fire, which is indeed true. And regarding a topic that we talked earlier about the Philadelphia Axis, so Netanyahu reiterating his claim that Israel will not give up security control over the Philadelphia Axis. That's the border between Gaza and Egypt. Now, this point has been a sticking point in the negotiations. We talked about this, but Hamas saying today we can't put all the responsibility on Netanyahu, even though he's not taking any, regarding the negotiations, because Hamas is saying that the negotiations are freezing until they manage to find a new, until they decide on a new successor, even if an interim successor to Haniyeh.
Right. Yaki, this Philadelphia Axis thing, the border between Egypt and Gaza, that was not in the deal that was publicly portrayed by President Biden at the time. And you see in Israel that the public in many polls do not buy this approach by Netanyahu.
Exactly. So the initial deal, the hostage deal that was presented by President Biden was before Israel entered to the Philadelphia corridor, before Israel controlled the Philadelphia corridor. So obviously this wasn't one of the points there in discussion. But nevertheless, that was the main axis of the entire armory that entered Gaza via Egypt. And this is not only a sticking point now in the negotiations, but also a sticking point between Prime Minister Netanyahu and the security forces, because the security forces claim that they can find some kind of a security arrangement for the Philadelphia corridor, while Netanyahu obviously saying that Israel has to control that because of the access that for the all the weaponry that entered Gaza. And as you said correctly, Jacob, the vast majority of the Israelis support the Netanyahu claim. They say that Israel has to remain in the Philadelphia corridor, because otherwise it will be again and again the Hamas will acquire new weaponry and will strengthen and will resume their forces. So this is a sticking point between Netanyahu and Hamas, but also between Netanyahu and its security forces.
Just to reiterate, most Israelis would like to see a hostage deal first and foremost.
100%, but nevertheless, and it contradicts, the 2 points might contradict, but they say that they want to see a hostage deal first and foremost, but saying that Israel has to remain in the Philadelphia corridor as well.
All right. After the assassination of Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh, the next in line may be someone who survived just that many years ago. I-24 News' Ariel Osuran reports.
The surprise and mysterious assassination of its leader Ismail Haniyeh has thrown Hamas into an unexpected succession campaign. Hamas has begun talks in Qatar to select its new leader, with much speculation as to who might fill Haniyeh's shoes.
I assure the public that Hamas will maintain its line and remain solid. Hamas is an institutionalized movement with legislative institutions, and it is the decision maker in dealing with any event that takes place within the movement.
But the identity of the successor could have major implications over the future of the terror group. The three leading names to replace Hania are his predecessor, Khaled Mashal, the deputy head of Hamas in Gaza, Khalil al-Haya, and senior official Musa Abu Marzouk.
Abu al-Abed, Hania lived among his people in the Shati camp, sharing their pains and joys. He served his cause, his people, and Jerusalem as a fighter, preacher, Quran memorizer, and prime minister. He was always with his people and never abandoned them. He left Gaza only to fight for his cause around the world until he met his end.
Mashal is considered the natural choice. He's a founding member of Hamas and previously held the position between 2004 and 2017. He also enjoys the support of the Muslim Brotherhood. But multiple Arab news outlets report that Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, rejects Mashal's nomination. He prefers his own deputy, Khalil al-Haya, to increase his sway among the group's top leadership abroad. Hania's successor will be tapped by Hamas's political bureau and its top Shura Council. But deciding on the replacement at a time of war with Israel might not pass so smoothly.
So Ariel Saran here in the studio. Well, where's Sinwar and Iran in all of this?
Well, I think the entire country is asking where's Sinwar, but specifically on this matter, naturally he would want his own guy to take the top political role of Hamas, given that now in the absence of Mohammad Def and Mohammad Def's deputy, Sinwar is pretty much the official military commander of Hamas right now. And another reason that is believed to be why Sinwar is inclined to tout El-Haya is because El-Haya is seen as having better connections with Iran, with Syria. This is something that's important to him because Sinwar sees he's putting all his cards in the Iranian basket, whereas the Muslim Brotherhood, the more formal establishment that backs Hamas, they want their own guy, the traditional guy, Khaled Mashal, who we see on the screen now. As you alluded to, he survived an assassination attempt. Israel had to not only provide the antidote, but had to release the spiritual leader of Hamas, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. He was then eliminated again by Israel. But at the end of the day, we see that there's two camps in Hamas. Some like to say Hamas in Gaza and Hamas abroad. I think there's a lot of intertwinings among there, but we do see Muslim Brotherhood camp and Yahya Sinwar camp.
And if you look historically, assassination on top of assassinations, and Hamas just got stronger and stronger.
They got stronger and stronger, some might say, maybe until now. The question is from now, with Hamas number 1 and 2 for the political wing and also the military wing gone, it will be very challenging for Hamas to pick up the pieces from here.
Dariel, thank you. Thank you, Yaki, as well. Let's move on to this. Turkey blocked access to Instagram after the social network blocked posts following the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. So we are joined by Mike Sexton, an expert on cybersecurity. Good evening to you.
Happy to be here.
First of all, we understand Instagram is too popular, so people in Turkey found some ways to connect anyway. It is hard to block it entirely, right? Or maybe impossible.
Yes, obviously, Instagram, I believe I saw today, has about 50 million users in Turkey. So it is a very popular app, not just in Turkey, I mean, really around the world, even in countries like Iran that heavily censor the internet. So this is a really difficult kind of decision for Turkey to make this political choice because Instagram is censoring the glorification of terrorism.
Now, as we know, social networks are all about users, and the question is whether pressures from governments such as this from Turkey can affect their decision-making.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, we have seen many heads of state, governments that have attended the funeral of Ismail Haniyeh in Doha, who have released public statements condemning the attack and honoring the memory of Ismail Haniyeh. But for those of us who live outside of their headspace, Ismail Haniyeh is a leader of a terrorist organization. The glorification of terrorism is not considered the sort of speech that you allow on a social network.
Yeah. Well, we have seen what's happening on social networks, on Twitter and elsewhere. I mean, this is a major issue, promoting terrorism and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I believe that when people are allowed to just broadly glorify terrorism, mourn terrorists, they embolden terrorists and they worsen the situation and the targeting of civilians. So in my mind, in the mind of Meta and even the oversight board that oversees Meta, these decisions are not very easy. There are complications, right? But it's pretty clear at the end of the day for the decision makers at Meta, and I would agree that the glorification of terrorism is not the kind of speech that they will permit on that social network.
What would be your expectation? Anything will be done about it?
Well, in the United States, we have seen similar censorship from Meta-owned platforms against, for example, transphobia or Republicans who reject the outcome of the 2020 election. So if Erdogan is so enthusiastic about this, he could perhaps start a separate social network that does allow for the glorification of terrorism, or perhaps that bans Zionists. That is always an option. So, you know, there's you can censor what's available, or you can create your own alternative.
All right, Mike Sexton, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. At least 37 civilians were killed and over 200 were injured in an explosion at a popular beach restaurant in the Somali capital of Mogadishu that happened late on Friday. Here's more in the next report.
They didn't have time to run. The popular Lido Beach in Mogadishu, Somalia, turned into a nightmare when a suicide attack carried out by al-Shabaab militants killed at least 32 people and injured 63 others.
As I arrived at the beach and approached the exact location of the explosion, only a few steps away, I saw a flame coming towards me and had nowhere to escape.
Al-Shabaab is Al-Qaeda's East Africa affiliate and controls large parts of central and southern Somalia. In a statement claiming the attack, it said politicians and security forces were targeted. The group has waged a brutal insurgency against the government for almost 2 decades. As such, the local population is not unfamiliar with terrorist attacks. Meanwhile, earlier on Friday, hundreds of protesters gathered in the capital to mourn the death of Ismail Haniyeh, one of the 2 main leaders of another terrorist organization, Hamas.
We urge all Muslim communities worldwide to organize themselves and hold large demonstrations to show unity. We gathered here to express our support for our Palestinian brothers and sisters, and specifically for Hamas and Gaza.
The demonstrators showed their support for the Palestinian cause and denounced Israel, who is widely believed to be behind the targeted killing of Haniyeh, and who is currently at war with Hamas.
I am unable to express my emotions today because as Muslims, our feelings are very tense. We are deeply sorry for the killing of the Hamas leader.
Most of the victims of Friday's Mogadishu attack were civilians.
Let's take an Olympic break now. Paris is shaping to be Israel's best ever. Fabio Shapiro has more on that.
It was a historic weekend for Israel. After a successful Thursday with judokas Inbar Lanier and Peter Pauchik receiving silver and bronze in their categories, Friday saw another Israeli medal in the tatami. Ras Hershko reached the final of the plus 78 kilo women's judo after defeating her Turkish adversary in the semifinals in only 13 seconds. But Brazilian Beatriz Souza used her weight advantage to win the final with a Vazari. There was no love lost between the 2 competitors, who held each other in emotion for the medals gained. It was Sunday when the Israeli competitors shined. Despite the protesters outside the venue, Israeli gymnast Artem Godopiat flew high, landing perfectly on the floor to guarantee the silver medal, while French officials reiterated their commitment to safeguard the Israeli delegation.
We are protecting in a very meticulous way all of the delegations, whether they are from certain Arab nations or the Israeli delegation, in a very meticulous manner and with our very committed special forces.
But it was at the sea that Israel made its day, the same sea that bathes its shores. Sharon Cantor fought hard against the strong Mediterranean winds to earn the silver medal in windsurfing. Yet, her biggest win was to inspire her colleagues.
I think the girls opened the door and they were training really hard from the beginning and showed that it's possible to be on the podium. And I saw that and I wanted to be part of it, so I worked hard as well and wanted to join in.
And join in he did. Tom Reuveni dominated the sea and achieved Israel's first gold medal in the Paris Games. And it is at the sea that Israel will be fighting for more medals in the dinghy and kite categories in the coming days. Another gold is all that Israel needs to make this the country's all-time best performance in Olympic Games.
So here in the studio we have the one and only Uri Levy to talk about sports. Good to see you again. Those Israeli athletes, why are they good at what they do?
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
You know, especially now, especially when we are speaking about an Olympic and a sports event that's taking place in such a turmoil and boiling time here in Israel. But the fact is that it's much, I wouldn't say easier, but maybe for Israel as half-developed sports ecosystem, it's much easier to support and develop an individual athlete than what everybody expects.
And a soccer team, let's call it this
a soccer team,
but,
exactly.
you know, I can figure out why water sports is great in Israel. It's, you know, it has a great beach, everybody's in the beach. Why judo? Where is that coming from?
Well, I think judo is a sport with great values that Israelis appreciate a lot, and values that every average Israeli is hoping his kid, boy or a girl, will endorse and have as growing up as a person in this world, whether he will go and be a professional judoka or not. And the result is astonishing. You know, we saw in the previous Olympic in Tokyo, obviously the first medals of Israel in general in the Olympics were 92, Oren Smadja and Yael Arad. Yael Arad, the manager of the delegation nowadays, Oren Smadja, the coach of Peter Palchik, who won a bronze medal in this weekend. And we are speaking about the best weekend ever of Israeli sports. Yaakov, 6 medals in 48 hours. It's absolute dream, including Artem Dolgopiat that was injured ahead of these Olympics. We remember him winning the medal in Tokyo, but his first hit in this Olympic wasn't so good. He got into the final in the last second. We also remember his gesture after October 7 when he won the World Championship and later on sold his gold medal from Tokyo on an auction in order to support the families from the Gaza envelope that had to leave their houses due to the disaster. So his story and his silver medal making him maybe the greatest Israeli athlete of all time. This is what we are speaking here about. Yeah. And you are asking why especially judo and surfing and gymnastics. So, you know, the common joke saying that they are all sports that people doesn't need to use shoes to do them.
The shoeless sports.
The shoes, yes.
What about other Middle Eastern countries?
Yes, so it's quite interesting. We are seeing until now 3 medals for...
one just today.
Yeah, one just today by Kailia Nemur from Algeria, 17-year-old, who was competing for France until 16, but due to some kind of a dispute with the French gymnastic union, decided to switch loyalty to Algeria, her parents' country, and won a gold medal for Algeria. Another gold medal for Algeria is coming in the boxing for women. Iman Khalif, a very interesting story about a boxer that is having, I would say, a discussion around her due to the fact that she has male hormones above the average that is allowed for World Championship, but it is accepted by the Olympic criteria. So it's going to be an interesting discussion around her. And another medal might come in the football tournament, Yaakov, as we have a historical tournament for Arab national teams in the Olympics. Both Morocco and Egypt qualified for the semi-finals, so for sure another medal for the Arab world. You know, the whole 22 countries will come from the football, but so far a very disappointing Olympic Games for the Arab countries. Only 4 medals, 3.5 medals we can speak by now, compared to Tokyo, that was the best ever for them with 18, 5 gold medals, 5 silver medals, and 8 bronze. They might look for an improvement right on, because the Olympic is gonna be over next week.
Right, next week already.
Yeah,
huh?
already.
All right. Uri Levy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yaakov.
Thank you for coming. And this is it from Middle East Now. Stay tuned for the rundown with Kalev Ben David here on I-24 News. Have a good night from Tel Aviv.
Okay, I had my visa.
So I can get the soda.
Anyone you want.
Thank you.
Here.
Just how to get it.
Take it out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Meeting you.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
Preparations to defend against an attack from Iran and its proxies in revenge for the killing of Hamas leader Haniyeh. We'll have the details. Terror on the home front. A Palestinian attacker on a stabbing rampage kills 2 Israelis in Holon before being shot dead. We'll report from the scene. President Biden reportedly losing patience with Prime Minister Netanyahu over a hostage deal. We'll take a closer look. This is the rundown on I-24 News. I'm Khaled Ben David. Israel has prepared a strong defense on land, sea, and air against any attack by Iran and its proxies. That's the message delivered this evening by IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari to a tense Israeli public. There are growing signs of the Iranian regime mobilizing its forces to revenge the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh last week in Tehran. More airlines are canceling their flights to Israel and the Mideast, and the U.S. is boosting its forces in the region to aid Israel in its defense as the international community urges restraint on all sides. Joe Brown has more on the preparations for the expected Iran-directed strike against Israel.
I emphasize that there is no change in instructions from Home Front Command. We will provide you with all the necessary warnings of all threats. And until we say otherwise, there is no change in the preparations for the home front. We will update you, only when it's necessary. In this regard, we are ready with a strong defense, in air, sea, and land.
The waiting game continues. Israelis are bracing for an imminent attack from Iran. No one knows when it will happen, or what exactly will happen, only that it will happen. But despite lingering fears of what could be heading their way, Israelis have a clear message. Life must go on.
Just don't take it like as black and white. If this rocket's going to go to Tel Aviv and that's it, building is going to fall. I'm pretty sure that everything is going to stay the same.
I just want to tell all the Israelis that we can't live in scared, and we need to continue our lives. And Am Yisrael Chai.
Israel has been on high alert after Iran vowed retaliation against the alleged IDF assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, as well as the confirmed IDF strike in Beirut that killed senior Hezbollah commander Fouad Shukr. And Israel is preparing for any eventuality.
We are prepared very strongly in defense, on land, and in the air. And we are ready to move quickly to attack or to respond. We will exact a price from the enemy, as we have been doing in recent days. If it dares to attack us, it will pay a heavy price.
As the US sends more of its warships and fighter jets to the Middle East, CENTCOM Chief Michael Kurilla has arrived in Israel, where he will meet IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi to discuss the best methods of foiling the impending Iranian attack. This comes a few days after Halevi met his British counterpart Sir Tony Radakin, where they also held a situational assessment on the rising tensions. Both the US and the UK helped Israel shoot down multiple Iranian missiles during the last attack in April. As did Jordan, whose Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi has travelled to Tehran on Sunday to try and cool tensions in the region. Meanwhile, flights to Israel have faced major disruptions, with dozens of international airlines cancelling flights to the region, as well as domestic flights between Tel Aviv and Eilat. But Israel has reiterated that its airspace is open, and its flagship carrier El Al has been adding flights to its schedule to make up for the cancellations. But the question remains, when will Iran strike? Reports suggest that the US is expecting it to be by Monday at the earliest. Northern Israel got a taste of what it could look like early on Sunday morning, with dozens of missiles fired from Lebanon. But this imminent Iranian attack, utilizing all of its proxies throughout the Middle East, will be considerably larger, even larger than April's salvo, and it is up to Israel and its allies to thwart these attacks or, at the very least, minimize the damage.
For more, let's go to our correspondent who's up in northern Israel, near the Lebanon border, Robert Swift. And Robert, while we're sitting in Tel Aviv talking about, well, we got to get ready for these rockets, missiles from Iran, etc., there in the north, the shooting, the fighting goes on, and there's been no break in that those attacks now, and the north is going to really be at the front line again if anything serious happens.
That's right. We were reporting from Shlomi a little bit earlier in the evening. We were speaking with residents there. Many of the population from that area have been evacuated months ago. But nonetheless, there's still quite a lot of people still living there. More so than, say, 6 months ago, I would suggest. And the two people I spoke to, they said that they thought similarly, that increasing numbers of people are coming back to the area. Now, that has dipped once again due to the tensions we're seeing. As we were reporting from that area, we could hear occasional gunshots coming from the border and even the occasional boom, likely part of Israel's response in the south of Lebanon to the ongoing tensions with Hezbollah. Most of the people we've spoken to in the area, they seem pretty sanguine, reserved, sort of just expecting more of the same. I think they were trying to put on a brave face with regards to the likely escalation from Iran and from Hezbollah itself, which would likely be the main actor firing across that border. With regards to that, the IDF has put out a briefing of sorts to the mayors of northern communities, essentially laying out to them some of the scenarios that the military believes are likely. Part of that was a mass evacuation of not just the northern communities already evacuated, but additional towns with the population likely being moved further south to Jerusalem, to other areas, even further south than that in Israel itself, with the IDF warning that communications, water and energy blackouts of up to 2-3 days is a possibility in such a scenario.
Right, and you talk about maybe Hezbollah perhaps being the main actor, certainly probably the most dangerous actor for Israel if there's a coordinated attack. And maybe one sign of it, we talked about airlines canceling their flights to Israel, but we see that also in Lebanon. And in fact, foreign governments telling their civilians, get out of Lebanon now while you can.
That's right. Increasingly, there's signs that many of Israel's Western allies and countries elsewhere in the world do expect some sort of escalation to take place. Iran has said in briefings it's made in Lebanese media, it said earlier today that it feels it has to respond in some way. Otherwise, it has no deterrence regarding Israel. Now, the fear from Israel is that the attacks that we've seen previously, this wave of attacks would be something of a magnitude higher. If Iran was to put all of its proxies, including Hezbollah from the north, the Iraqi militias to the east and the Houthis to the south, plus the direct fire from Iran itself, that this would represent a greater threat. But nonetheless, there are Israeli allies that are mobilizing, such as the United States and others, which seek to counter that threat.
All right, Robert Swift in northern Israel, and hopefully those people that are remaining there, towns like Shlomi, will take great care. Attack could come not only from the air, but cross-border attacks on land, as one has to imagine, also has to be taken into account. Robert Swift, thank you for that. And with us in studio, our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran and Reserves IDF Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital, the former commander of Special Forces for the IDF, and Doron Daniel Hagari, just in the last couple of hours, trying to calm the public, no change, saying Israel has prepared its defense. But he did stress no defense is hermetic, no defense is 100%. missiles can get through, and just one in the wrong place could lead to a very dangerous escalation.
Yeah, I think the Israeli public knows it. The Daniel guy had to say there's no airtight defense mechanism. There's always a missile or UAVs that can sneak the system, but we have a very strong defense mechanism, and we have the coalition behind us. We proved ourselves in the 13th of April, or the system proved itself overall. The question is, what's the magnitude of the attack? Where would the attack come from? Whether it would be a front only with Hezbollah, whether the Iranian directly attack like the 13th of April, the Houthim, whether this will be a coordinated attack of all fronts. There are many things to consider. Israel prepares itself in the defense, but also I think prepares the possibility of going on the offensive.
What does an offense mean? Attacking Iran? I mean,
if it comes from Hezbollah, so we have a well-planned procedure what to do against infrastructure of Hezbollah, against targets of Hezbollah, and perhaps if civil destination in Haifa would be destroyed, also attacking infrastructure in Lebanon. In terms of the Iranian, we'll have to consider what kind of, I mean, we have shown that those distances are not a barrier for our Air Force. We would have to decide what to do, in what calibration. It seems that not us, not them wants a far-reaching escalation or a full-blown war. Could we calibrate this? This would be the puzzle. Can we calibrate an exchange of fire? They would feel that they gained their pride after this assassination of Haniya, and whether this could settle down again, I'm not sure.
Right, we did it. It would happen in April, but the circumstances are different now. Ariel, Robert, and Doron saying the coalition that helped Israel back in April, also mobilizing its forces. But there is a member of that coalition that we could call a silent member that didn't want to admit it, which is Jordan, which, of course, over whose airspace many of those Iranian rockets were shot down. But it puts Jordan in a difficult spot, and we see the Jordanian foreign minister meeting with Iranian officials today. Where can Israel rely on Jordan, again, in this kind of scenario?
Yeah, a very rare visit by Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi, who, after holding multiple, at least 2 phone calls in the past 48 hours with Iran's acting foreign minister, now in a rare visit going to Tehran. The messaging, what Jordan is trying to portray to Iran is that they don't want their airspace to be used as a battleground between Iran and Israel, but stating that anything that will fly over their airspace will be intercepted. This is messaging even coming out now, that they maintain the right to keep a neutral airspace. And as you mentioned, back in April, they did take part in downing some of the drones and ballistic missiles that flew over their territory, because to get to Iran from Israel, you have to go over Jordan. The thing is, calling it a coalition, I think, is premature, because
they certainly wouldn't use that word.
They wouldn't use, and even if you have a group of countries acting simultaneously or in cooperation, in the absence of a mechanism that maintains this joint cooperation, unfortunately, there isn't a coalition against Iran in the region, one that Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and UAE. Other countries, UAE, would like to and should be part of. Unfortunately, we're not yet at that period in time. I think this, if indeed Iran makes true to its threats and does fire, and they do go over Jordan, it'll be interesting to see if for a second time they down what goes over their heads. And their trip to Iran is there to relay the message, not from Israel, because Safadi said we're not relaying any messages to and from Israel, but saying that if we do intercept anything from Iran, it is not an act of aggression, but we're just maintaining our own sovereignty.
I would say 2 things. First of all, we have to make the distinction between the cooperation in the political level and the cooperation in the security level, which is much more tight than we may think. It's also with Egypt, or for sure for Jordan. Then the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Jordanian was also going there on behalf of the U.S., not on behalf of the Israel, but I'm sure he was conveying some messaging warning from the U.S. about the level of escalation that Iran is trying to initiate. So, and if there would be attack through Jordan, I'm sure that the coalition would operate on the skies of Jordan, and I think the Jordanian would accept it if this context.
That would certainly be key to Israel's defense. All right, gentlemen, we're going to come back to Iran and Hamas in a little bit, but while Israel was focused on external threats today, a deadly reminder of domestic dangers. The central city of Holon, just southwest of Tel Aviv, was shaken by southeast of Tel Aviv, was shaken by a terror attack in which 2 people were stabbed to death, including Rina Daniv, 66. Her husband was also injured. Now, the assailant, a Palestinian from the West Bank, was killed at the scene. Joe Brown has the details.
Horror in Holon. An Israeli woman in her late 60s and a man in his 70s were killed in a stabbing spree on Sunday morning in the central Israeli city just south of Tel Aviv.
The police quickly arrived to the scene as the terrorist was attacking the civilians who were here behind me. As you can see, enjoying the morning in the park, the terrorist managed to get to the main road where the police officers engaged him with gunfire, and his death was declared at the scene.
According to Magen David Adom, there were 3 separate attacks around 500 meters apart from each other. An elderly couple was stabbed at the entrance to a park. The husband taken to hospital in serious condition, whilst the wife was pronounced dead at the scene. 1 man was killed at a nearby bus stop, and another person was stabbed at the entrance to a bus terminal. The attacker was a 34-year-old resident of the West Bank who had no prior offences and did not have a permit to enter Israel. It is unclear how he managed to set foot on Israeli soil to carry out the attack. IDF troops visited the West Bank home of the terrorist, measuring it for a potential demolition. Also arriving on the scene, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, praising the police for neutralizing the terrorist and urging civilians to remain vigilant.
Our war is not only against Iran, but here in the streets. This is exactly why we armed the people of Israel. More than 150,000 gun licenses were issued in the last 8 months. I want to say to the citizens, carry weapons. Carry weapons. That's why we armed the civilian rapid response teams. That's why we open more and more civilian rapid response teams. Carry a weapon. It saves lives.
The 2 victims from this attack are the 24th and 25th deaths from Palestinian terror attacks in Israel and the West Bank since October the 7th, creating yet another front for Israel to worry about.
Well, our correspondent Nicole Tzedek was at the scene of today's terror attack in Holon and followed this report from there a short time ago.
It's been more than 12 hours since the terror stabbing happened right here in Holon in central Israel early this morning. And while life continues here in the park, people are already out about walking their dogs, but there are a few remnants that remain reminding of the terror attack that happened right here. Not only this red security tape that you can see behind me, but as we pan over here, you can see in the middle of the park, 1 latex glove likely left at the scene from some of the medical teams that came and treated the victims, as this is where Rina and Shimon Daniv were stabbed. Rina killed at the scene, her husband taken to the hospital. You can see also right here a memorial for them. This is one of the memorials of the 3 different scenes that we've seen today. This was a complex stabbing attack, according to security officers. This was just one of the 3 scenes that happened in the span of about 500 meters here in Holon. So the attacker first stabbed a man who was out walking his dog early in the morning on his regular route, then came here, stabbing the couple that was out enjoying this park. Also, according to their family, part of their routine. They would come here to this park in Holon and enjoy their early morning walk. Now, after that, the terrorist then went on to a nearby gas station and a bus stop that's just right across the park from us here, and that's where he stabbed and killed another one of his victims, a man in his 70s. It wasn't until then that a nearby police officer was able to see the attacker and neutralize him as well. Now, although Hamas has not claimed responsibility for the attack, they have come out and praised the terror attack. They said that this should spark and incite more violence from other people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem as well to come out and commit more of these types of attacks. And this is not unusual for Hamas, even though the attacker was not affiliated necessarily with Hamas or other terror organizations. When something like this does happen, it is typical for Hamas to then come out and try and incite more violence in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, for other people to come out and commit attacks like this. Now, the IDF is still investigating exactly how the attacker got into Israel, as the initial investigation says that this man who lived in the West Bank came over through the Hetzim corridor, the crossing, on August 1st, 3 days ago, and he doesn't appear to have a permit to enter Israel. So the IDF is still investigating exactly how he was able to come into Israel and stay here for the past 3 days before committing this attack here in Holon. Reporting for I-24 News, I'm Nicole Zetkin.
Well, Rena, then even the other victim who's not been identified yet, may their memories be a blessing. Now, getting back to Hamas, the death of Ismail Haniyeh was certainly a blow to the terror group, but there are some names already being bandied about as likely successors. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran takes a closer look at the leading contenders for Haniyeh's terror crown.
The surprise and mysterious assassination of its leader Ismail Haniyeh has thrown Hamas into an unexpected succession campaign. Hamas has begun talks in Qatar to select its new leader, with much speculation as to who might fill Haniyeh's shoes.
I assure the public that Hamas will maintain its line and remain solid. Hamas is an institutionalized movement with legislative institutions, and it is the decision maker in dealing with any event that takes place within the movement.
But the identity of the successor could have major implications over the future of the terror group. The three leading names to replace Haniyeh are his predecessor, Khaled Mashal, the deputy head of Hamas in Gaza, Khalil al-Haya, and senior official Musa Abu Marzouk.
Abu al-Abed Haniyeh lived among his people in the Shati camp, sharing their pains and joys. He served his cause, his people, and Jerusalem as a fighter, preacher, Quran memorizer, and prime minister. He was always with his people and never abandoned them. He left Gaza only to fight for his cause around the world until he met his end.
Mashal is considered the natural choice. He's a founding member of Hamas and previously held the position between 2004 and 2017. He also enjoys the support of the Muslim Brotherhood. But multiple Arab news outlets report that Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, rejects Mashal's nomination. He prefers his own deputy, Khalil al-Haya, to increase his sway among the group's top leadership abroad. Haniyeh's successor will be tapped by Hamas's political bureau and its top Shura Council. But deciding on the replacement at a time of war with Israel might not pass so smoothly.
Doron, the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, an impressive achievement, if whoever who did it, let's say. But as we see, there are figures ready to replace him. So how much benefit for Israel was his death?
Sure. First of all, you show capabilities. I mean, it's important, and you show that you can reach.
Even if you don't take credit for it.
Even if you don't, exactly, you don't take credit. But one thing for sure, the other side knows who did it. We might not say it here, but they know who did it. And this is a capabilities which, when you think about it, is really unimaginable. I mean, to find this opportunity and to start to do it in such a clean way. It's very important, the fact that we do those, if we do it in such exact manner, because it's part of our deterrence, that we can reach somebody in such far distance and do it in such a clean way. But, of course, like any other assassination in the past, I want to remind us Moussaoui was the head of Hezbollah in the late 80s and was taken off in southern Lebanon, and we had Nasrallah, which is a formidable opponent, we have to admit, and others that I don't want to mention in some contexts, and some of them are not wise assassination. But in this context, I'm sure they'll find a replacement. Whether he would have the magnitude of Haniyeh, it's not clear. For sure, Khaled Mashal he seemed to like the obvious position, but Sinwar doesn't want him, and he's not that close to Iran. And he also succeeded to survive an assassination attempt in Jordan back in the 90s. Remember the scandal with the Jordanian, and we have to bring the antidote and so on. So it's not clear. They would find somebody, but it also strengthened the positioning of Sinwar as, in the end, the final ultimate address in terms of with whom you negotiate in...
And is that why Yahya Sinwar doesn't want Khaled Mashal? Because he's got a prominence that would maybe detract from his leadership in Gaza?
Well, first of all, you always want your guy to take the key spot, and Khalil El-Haya, his deputy. You know, there's this. People tend to sometimes differentiate. There's Hamas in Gaza and Hamas abroad, and Hamas abroad they're like-minded, and Hamas in Gaza they're like-minded. But that's not always the case. And what appears to be here is that Sinwar indeed is putting all the eggs in the basket of Iran, whereas the Muslim Brotherhood, the traditional patron of Hamas, they're supporting Khalid Mashal. But I think, and what Doron said at the end is very important, and I want to emphasize that Hamas lost its number 1 and 2 in the military wing and in its political wing. And these are figures who drew the masses, who helped with the incitement. And Yahya Sinwar, the man perhaps closest to danger from all of them, managed to live out the longest. And he is emerging as the strongest person in Hamas right now. I don't think he wants to take the position for himself. He would much rather have his deputy assume the role outside of Gaza.
And who knows how long, much longer Yahya Sinwar might have. Now, one of the mysteries surrounding the death of Haniya is exactly how he was killed. Last week, the New York Times cited sources claiming he died from the blast of an explosive device planted in his highly secured quarters months earlier, but the Iranians are publicly claiming otherwise, as in this broadcast on Iran State TV.
The assassination of head of Hamas's political office was planned and executed by the Zionist regime with support from the criminal U.S. government. Based on investigations, the terrorist attack was carried out with a short-range projectile with a warhead as heavy as around 7 kilograms with a powerful blast from outside the designated district for accommodation of guests.
Doron, former head of Sayeret Matkal, the most elite commando units, carried out a lot of secret missions. Which sounds more plausible to you?
First of all, the spokesman of the IDF said no aircraft was involved. And then the question is whether there was some planned sabotaging of the positioning. I think it was the Roman philosopher Seneca who said that luck is when opportunity meets capability. So there's clear that the Mossad, if it's us, showed a lot of capabilities inside Iran and penetrated Iran in different ways, like the killing of the head of the
nuclear program
by remote control mechanism. So this is clearly within the capabilities we have shown, and maybe the opportunity arose when Haniya visited the guest house. Nobody can tell. In the future, I hope the mystery will be resolved, but in terms of an operational perspective, this is a great...
Either way, the Mossad or whoever did it was able to penetrate that area, the most secure area, maybe in all of Iran, maybe outside the nuclear sites,
this is
and
the guest house of the Revolutionary Guards. Succeed to do such
Sounds like a TV show that they have on in Israel, but that's all I will say about that. Doron Avital, Ariel Osron, please stay with us. We are going out for a brief break, but stay with us. Lots more coming up on The Rundown. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to the Rundown on I-24 News. Now, even as Israel braces for a probable attack from Iran and its proxies, the international community remains focused on whether or not there will be a ceasefire for a hostages deal in Gaza. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu is under mounting pressure to give the go-ahead for a deal, as U.S. President Joe Biden is reported to be losing his patience with the premier. Our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini has more in this report.
U.S. President Joe Biden is reportedly fed up with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. According to local media, the American president told the Israeli leader to, quote, stop bullshitting him during their phone conversation late last week. Biden has previously hinted that Netanyahu was stalling efforts to reach a ceasefire for hostages deal with Hamas, and he reportedly added that Israel should not take the president for granted.
I'm very concerned about it. I had a very direct meeting with Prime Minister today, and very direct. We have the basis for a ceasefire. He should move on it, and they should move on it now.
The chance for a ceasefire ruined after the assassination of Haniyeh.
It's not helped.
Wednesday's strike on Hamas top political chief Ismail Haniyeh shocked the leaders of Iran and its proxies Hamas and Hezbollah, and has been widely attributed to Israel, which is nearing 10 months of war with Hamas in Gaza. Haniyeh was one of the key figures in negotiating a ceasefire for hostages deal that would see a halt to the war and the return of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Days before his death, reports claimed the chance for reaching a deal was closer than ever. Now it's unclear what will happen. On the streets of Israel, protesters continued to demonstrate against the government and for a ceasefire and hostage deal sooner rather than later.
What we have been screaming for months is now clear. There is a hostage release deal on the table, and Netanyahu is deliberately conducting a targeted attack against it.
Netanyahu insists he is still working towards a deal, but Hamas says that the organization has frozen the talks until a successor to Ismail Haniyeh is chosen.
I reiterate and tell our enemies, we will respond and we will exact a heavy price for any act of aggression against us, from whatever quarter. At the same time, we are making a supreme effort on a daily basis to return all of our hostages, without exception. We have an ironclad commitment to return all of them, the living and the deceased. I am prepared to go very far to release all of our hostages while maintaining the security of Israel. The simple truth is that, as of now, Hamas has not agreed to the most basic conditions of the outline.
Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis have vowed retaliation, and Israel is bracing for a response.
Now, all of the hostage stories are heartbreaking, and I stress that, but perhaps none more so than that of the Bibas family. Taken captive from kibbutz Nir Oz on October 7th was Yarden Bibas. his wife Shiri, their then 9-month-old baby Kfir, and 4-year-old Ariel, who turns 5 tomorrow in captivity. Well, joining us now from Kfar Saba is Tomer Keshet, a cousin of Yarden Bibas. And Tomer, first of all, I just want to ask you your mood and that of your family, the extended family of the Bibas. It does always seem every time we're getting maybe some reason for optimism towards a deal. Prime Minister Netanyahu came back from Washington. Maybe there were hopes that would lead it. Now, again, something else has come up, this pending attack or not from Iran. So just give a sense of how that plays with the emotions of you and your family members.
It's not easy. It's not easy to get on this roller coaster of emotions when you get hopeful that things are going to turn out different this time, and then it returns to the status quo of there's nothing going on. Our loved ones are not yet home. It's not easy to...
Understood. Now, if you were watching, you saw the clip, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and we do stress Hamas is the party, the guilty party, the evil party in this. But there are those who would feel that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not putting enough stress or emphasis on reaching a deal. What's your message and the family's message to him and the government at this time?
When I think of Ariel and Kfir, and Yarden and Shiri being held in the tunnels of Gaza by this evil organization that his number one intention is to harm us. I don't think that we can allow ourselves the luxury of letting an opportunity, a deal, go by. It's something that we need to, as a country, we need to make sure that we keep negotiating. It doesn't matter what the correct status or what the correct position is. The negotiations should keep going on all the time. And all of our top minds in Israel, I know that they can solve it. I know this sometimes, and I do lose hope from time to time. But when I think of our strength as Israelis, I know that there is no problem that we can solve together. And if our government is willing to keep this negotiation going all the time, I know that a solution will be found. But if we let ourselves say things like we should not negotiate because someone from our government is not interested, or we shouldn't negotiate because now Hamas is refusing. No, drag them to the negotiation table and tell them it's time to negotiate, it's time for a deal, and there will be a solution.
Right. Now, as you were talking, I did say at the beginning, all the stories of the hostages are heartbreaking and terrible. But the reality is that the story of Kfir and Ariel and their images have become such a symbol of the inhumanity of what's happening there to the hostages, what happened there on October 7th and beyond. And maybe what's your message to the world, the international community? They talk about the children in Gaza, all eyes on Rafah. And yet here we have these two little children. This situation happens. So your message now also to the wider world on that.
I want to start with the message that I got, and it may surprise you, but people around the world care. We got a video clip of people in Melbourne, Australia. They gather around, had a cake and a candle for Ariel. And they lit this candle as a candle of hope, as a message that Ariel needs to come home and be with his grandmother. He needs to be with his cousins. He needs to play with them. And I think that we can't allow ourselves, again, as we can't normalize having children in the hands of terrorists and say it's for a good cause. I mean, as the opposite direction. Not, of course, not our direction, but we cannot say it, because if we say it's okay that children are being held in terrorists' hands, then we lost as a society. We lost our values, we lost our moral core, and we lost our heart. Because families, mother, father, children, I think that I can speak as a member of the human race, as a father. I think it's above everything. And my message to the world, to answer your question, don't give up. Don't give up on our values. Don't give up on our loved ones. In this case, it's a family from Niroz in Israel. But if we let this be the new normal, the situation will become more and more dire and more dangerous to the citizens of the world. So I propose this, a simple request. Tomorrow, it's the 5th of August. Kfir Ariel is going to celebrate, I don't know if we can call it a celebration, but we will think about Kfir's birthday, 5th birthday in Gaza in the hands of terrorists.
Right, Ariel's birthday.
Ariel. I keep thinking of Kfir.
Of course.
Of course, it's Ariel. Kfir had his first birthday in captivity, which is terrible. So tomorrow it's Ariel's birthday. Light a candle for him to show that we will get him back, and make a wish of hope, and go the extra mile. Post it on Instagram, post it on the social networks, because the world needs to remember that we didn't forget.
Tomer, I would like to thank you for joining us and speaking those powerful words, and I do hope the world and anyone watching this and well beyond will heed those words. And of course, we join with you in wishing for the quick and safe, immediate and safe return of Yarden, Shiri, Kfir, and Ariel, and of course all the hostages as well. Tomer Kesher, thank you for joining us on I-24 News.
Thank you so much.
Gentlemen, Doron, when I hear that, again, when just you hear those words, I don't even know what to say in response.
No, it's heartbreaking, of course, and right now, of course, we can understand that there will be a pause in the hostage negotiation, because we have to admit there's no negotiator,
right?
In any respect. And Biden was right; it didn't help. But this is the context, and we have to weigh the option one against the other. But let's hope that after some pause, of course, we have the anticipation of the attacks, and but then in some moment we can resume those negotiations. And I think once they're resumed, we have to be very aggressive in achieving a result. And what is frightening is what we heard lately in the last few days about some clash or a wedge between the team that conducts the negotiation, the head of the Mossad, the head of the Shabak, and the General Nitzan Alon, whom I appreciate a lot. He was one of the best soldiers, the best officer I've met in my army career, and Bibi. And there was even some wording which was not flattering about the way Bibi treated them and the way they think they don't get enough. He doesn't delegate enough decision-making capacity for them, and this is too bad, because this is the only way to do it. I think the two main obstacles, if the negotiations resume, of course, the Philadelphia route, and this is where the Egyptians are involved, and the visit of that.
Well, I'm going to ask you to hold on a bit, because I do want to, there is some relevant news on that. In fact, let's turn to the ongoing battle inside Gaza. Now, despite its military capabilities being severely degraded, Hamas terrorists did succeed in launching 5 rockets at the coastal city of Ashdod today, though no injuries or damage were reported. Now, shortly after that, the IDF ordered the residents of parts of Khan Yunis to evacuate to nearby safe zones, warning that the army will resume military operations in that key Gaza city. The IDF also announcing today that it had discovered dozens of smuggling tunnels beneath the Philadelphia corridor area, which sits on the border between Gaza and Egypt, including one tunnel big and tall enough to drive a vehicle through. So that is the question, Doron, because though defenders of Prime Minister Netanyahu say this only shows you how important it is to keep IDF forces in the Philadelphia corridor.
But the other side of this coin is that we have to admit and understand that if we hold the Philadelphia corridor by our troops, in some sense it means that we are the conquering force in Gaza. And this means the responsibility over the Gazan citizen. It's not that simple. Now, the spokesman of the IDF today was very clear and said that the IDF presented a few optional ideas, technological and otherwise, that wouldn't necessitate that really the presence of the IDF on the corridor, and that it was presented to the government or to Bibi Netanyahu, and this would have to be considered. So this is one obstacle also for the hostage deal, because it's hard to see a hostage deal when the Israeli forces are still on the Philadelphia route, and I'm not sure the Egyptian would accept it either. Then we have the Netzarim, the corridor that separates between the north and the
North and South Gaza, yes.
And the flow of Gazans from the
south to the north, which Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly wants to see security checks on all those.
And who would hold the security checks? The IDF, some other forces, who would be the other forces? How would you make sure that no Hamas operative go to the north? So there are big issues here, and those, I think, are the two main obstacles. And of course, the readiness of Hamas to go back to the negotiation.
Right, Ariel.
Look, all this is good and well, but we need to remember two simple facts. One, the current proposal that we're discussing, or that the mediators are discussing, is an Israeli proposal, which only after the fact had added to it issues like the Philadelphia corridor and the travel limits of travel from
south to north.
The agreement stipulated that in the second phase, Israel will withdraw completely from all parts of the Gaza Strip.
In the second phase, which is important to point out.
Yeah, and this is something that Israel had agreed to in advance. And so the addition of these new demands is not helping. On the other hand, there's also Hamas saying that the talks have frozen until they elect a new leader. And so that is another element that is open-ended, that is also challenging, dampening the chances for an agreement at this time.
Right. I mean, I do want to stress, and we do want to stress, there is the question of whether, with all their talk, Hamas is really ready to make an agreement. And every time they have come close, they reportedly put up certain obstacles, claiming they don't know where all the hostages are. They can't provide a full list. And certainly it's going to be both of them involved here.
There are two sides to this quandrum, but of course we have to make any efforts, because we can't leave Gaza without first having the hostages back and then thinking of the day after, who rules Gaza. So there are many objectives here to consider, together with the Americans, together with the Emirates, together with the other Arab countries that are adjunct to Gaza, like the Egyptian. Many obstacles ahead, but I think we have to force it. And I would insist again that we have to delegate the maximum force possible to our team that does the negotiation. There are great people there, and I hope they would come with an outcome if Hamas is there, of course.
Right. And when you hear the words of someone like Tomer this evening and think about the Bibas family, those children, certain sacrifices have to be made to try to get them back.
Time is running out.
Even if it involves certain security risks, perhaps. Doron Avital and, of course, Ariel Osseron, thank you for joining us in the studio this evening. We are going to continue the broadcast. In fact, at a very difficult time, to put it lightly, here in Israel, the Israeli national spirit is at least being uplifted by the performance of its athletes at the Paris Olympic Games. Now, outstanding efforts in the judo and sailing competitions has reaped a rich harvest of medals for Israel by athletes who have the extra burden of having to compete while under very tight security there in Paris in the face of protests and outright threats. Fabio Shapiro has their story.
It was a historic weekend for Israel. After a successful Thursday with judokas Inbar Lanier and Peter Pauchik receiving silver and bronze in their categories, Friday saw another Israeli medal in the tatami. Ras Hershko reached the final of the plus 78 kilo women's judo after defeating her Turkish adversary in the semifinals in only 13 seconds. But Brazilian Beatriz Souza used her weight advantage to win the final with a Vazari. There was no love lost between the two competitors, who held each other in emotion for the medals gained. It was Sunday when the Israeli competitors shined. Despite the protesters outside the venue, Israeli gymnast Artem Godopiat flew high, landing perfectly on the floor to guarantee the silver medal, while French officials reiterated their commitment to safeguard the Israeli delegation.
We are protecting in a very meticulous way all of the delegations, whether they are from certain Arab nations or the Israeli delegation, in a very meticulous manner and with our very committed special forces.
But it was at the sea that Israel made its day, the same sea that bathes its shores. Sharon Cantor fought hard against the strong Mediterranean winds to earn the silver medal in windsurfing. Yet, her biggest win was to inspire her colleagues.
I think the girls opened the door and they were training really hard from the beginning and showed that it's possible to be on the podium. And I saw that and I wanted to be part of it, so I worked hard as well and wanted to join in.
And join in he did. Tom Reuveni dominated the sea and achieved Israel's first gold medal in the Paris Games. And it is at the sea that Israel will be fighting for more medals in the dinghy and kite categories in the coming days. Another gold is all that Israel needs to make this the country's all-time best performance in Olympic Games.
Well, this is a record of number of medals, but Fab is referring there to getting some gold medals, and that may be within reach of Israel. Amazing performance under these conditions. Kol hakavod. Now, the wave of pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, and yes, certainly in some cases, anti-Semitic protests that erupted on U.S. college campuses after October 7th have abated somewhat during the summer recess months. But their traumatic effect on Jewish students and faculty lingers on, as well as concerns that more of these are to come when the new school year starts up in September. A delegation of students and faculty from New York City's Columbia University, which has certainly been a hotbed of these kind of protests, was in Israel recently as both a show of solidarity and also to meet with their Israeli counterparts to discuss finding a way to move forward. Emily Francis went out to meet them and to hear their stories.
A delegation of 25 Columbia University faculty and staff, as well as New York City doctors, took the trip of a lifetime in the wake of the October 7th massacre.
I don't think there's anything that can compare to actually being here, physically walking through the ruins of Kfar Aza and seeing the devastation, seeing where people have been murdered and assaulted, sexually assaulted. Nova Festival, which to me was actually in a way the most surreal of experiences, because that was the kind of festival that I've been to before and would go to, and to just imagine that could have been me, that could have been my friends.
We come here with no political agenda whatsoever. We come here really in a fact-finding mission, and we're hoping to, when we leave here, to understand much more about this country, what it has gone through, to understand the trauma of its citizens.
Columbia University has been ground zero of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic demonstrations that hit a fever pitch when hundreds set up illegal encampments on campus. Jewish students and faculty feared for their safety, not only on campus, but also throughout New York City.
To see that so blatant, so open, without any repercussions, that's not the America that I was raised in. And then you ride the train in New York City, the subway, and people probably stand up and say, you know, if there's any Zionists on the train, now's the time to identify yourself.
Amy Werman, a professor for master's students at Columbia School of Social Work, finds it complicated to balance her own experience as a Jew with the ethos of being a social worker.
Our mandate is to be able to treat everyone. Okay, we care about people's well-being, and that really is independent of skin color, race, ethnicity, geography, socioeconomic status. So that's the challenge, right? Trying to remember who we are, what our ethical obligations are, and stay true to that.
We've had so far around 20 universities who decided to cut collaborations on the institutional level. That is, we have agreements with these universities, and they said no more.
The delegation also met with fellow academics at various Israeli universities, including Tel Aviv University's Lowy International School. This group is the 10th delegation of university academics and students to Israel, following in the footsteps of University of Pennsylvania, UCLA, Harvard, and others.
Some people here are afraid to speak to media because they know that if that gets out, then they will have death threats for them and their children. And they say, we're actually feeling safer here because here we actually have freedom of speech. We could say what we want freely without feeling that we're subject to violence, without feeling
canceled.
That we're going to be canceled, you know.
Overall, this group and their Israeli counterparts are trying to put their minds together to find ways to pave a new path for the future.
How do we build a bridge? You know, whose model can we follow to do this? And we are also here to sort of bond with each other and form a cohesive group so that when we go back to Colombia, we'll be able to sort of mobilize in the most effective way based on who we've spoken to here and what we've learned.
In Tel Aviv, Emily Francis, I-24 News.
Well, good luck to those professors and students when the new school year starts in the U.S. That ends this edition of The Rundown. Of course, you can continue to follow us on our website or our various social media platforms as well. And we will be back, of course, tomorrow night with a whole new show. In the meantime, I say, and I repeat what I said earlier, let's see the hostages come home as soon and safe as possible in any way possible. And if you can catch The Rundown on I-24 News, please do. Thank you for joining us.